Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, we got two fascinating people on the show. We somehow was able to bring Teresa back from retirement. So we got the spiritual gangster herself joining us in I don't know how long. But we also have Dr. Angela Puca joining us today, which I am extremely excited for. This is a topic that I've wanted to cover for a while. And I'll be honest, I haven't found anybody that I thought was worth listening to until I came across her. So before we introduce her, let me introduce the other rejects. And like I said already, we got Teresa back with us for this one. Teresa, please let everybody know what's up with you.
Thank you for inviting me back on for this one. I'm excited. I've been absent a while, but I'm pumped to come back for this because it's Italian. I'm Italian, so I wanted to learn more about like my cultural heritage, and I'm really curious to hear from Dr. Puca. So thank you for having me back.
Of course, appreciate it. And we got the man himself, the storyteller, Robbie Marks. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, Nick. I'm excited about this one as well. Good to meet you, Dr. Puca. And I've studied a bit of witchcraft here and there in regard to Leland with his Aradia and kind of getting into, some of the Etruscan stuff. So I'm really interested to go down this road and learn some new things. So thanks for coming on with us.
Thank you for joining us, Robbie.
And to plug myself, Robbie Marks, you can go to my link tree, RMARX, and that'll pull up everything I do, my art, my podcast, et cetera, et cetera. Thanks.
Definitely go check out his art. He's got tons of it. Very impressive stuff. And last but not least, we got my man, Matt, with us again. What is going on, sir? I'm so glad you can make it.
So glad to be here as well. So thanks for calling. Also happy to be in this specific conversation. I'm in Italy right now, do have Italian heritage as well. So it's also very nice to learn more about this kind of things. So nice to meet you, Angela and Teresa. If anyone wants to find my work, always at Mora19. That's on X, YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, Instagram, and I think that's it. A lot of stuff. Also, my website, that's Kabbalah.com, KAABALAH.com. And we have the spaces on X every Friday with the Grey Lodge. That's the True Grey Lodge with a V instead of a U. So truth, thetruegraylodge.com. You can find our work there or join our spaces every Friday. That's really cool as well. And let's go.
Awesome. Thank you very much, sir. I really appreciate you joining us. And finally, last but not least, we get to the guest herself. We have Dr. Angela Puca with us today, and she is a scholar of religious studies whose research focuses on magic, witchcraft, paganism, esotericism, and shamanism. She's been teaching at Leeds Trinity University since 2016 and earned her PhD at the University of Leeds in 2021 with research on Italian witchcraft and shamanism, which we'll be talking about today. And if you don't already know, you better know she's got a YouTube channel called Angela's Symposium. And I honestly think people who listen to this channel will really like what she has because, again, she brings the academic to the occult, and that's something that I'm huge on. So definitely go check out her channel. I'm sure you'll love all her work. Now I'm going to shut up and I'll let her introduce herself. Please, Dr. Angela, let everybody know, where they can find you or anything you'd like to plug, please.
Yes, so thank you very much for inviting me. As you said, I'm a religious studies scholar and a university lecturer. I'm based at Leeds Trinity University, but I have taught and collaborate with several universities worldwide. This spring, I was at the University of Rome teaching, and I'm also part of a research project that they have on magic. And also their department is fantastic. I was really impressed. I taught also at the University of Catania in Sicily. I've given lectures at Harvard. I'm really committed to bridging the gap between academia and the community of practitioners. And my project is called Angela's Symposium. So people find me on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, pretty much everywhere on all social media. And my website is drangelapuca.com, drangelapuca.com. And you find my online courses. If you're interested in Italian witchcraft, there is one dedicated specifically to that. as well as I have a course on the left-hand path, and there's the option also to book tutoring sessions with me, one-to-one sessions. And for those who love my project of delivering free academic scholarships to the wider public, my Patreon is also an option to join my community on Discord with monthly lectures and monthly calls and so on. And it really helps because my project is crowdfunded, so that's essential that people support it. So yeah, thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to our conversation.
Yes, no, very much. I really, really appreciate you coming on. And again, just to reiterate it for the people listening, when I was looking at a YouTube channel, there was a couple of shows I was like, God damn, I wish I would have thought of that as a topic. Now I can't do it because I look like I'm copying her. Definitely go check out.
Well, you can still do it, and reference my video, and then add your take.
There you go.
I think that's literally what academics do all the time. I mean, we always we reference each other, and then we add our own take or our own opinion. Yeah. So as long as people reference each other, I don't see a problem.
I got you. No, I'll have to keep that in mind. Maybe I will do that. But I guess just to start it off, what got you into even studying this stuff? How did this catch your attention? You're like, this is what I'm going to do.
I think it was a long journey because being born and raised in Italy, Italy is a very strong Catholic country, and there is a reason why I had to move to the UK to do my PhD, because it was impossible to do it in Italy. But I did my bachelor's and my master's in Italy at the University of Naples because I'm from Napoli, Neapolitan. So I did my bachelor's and master's, and while I was doing my academic formation, I didn't even think that it was possible to study esotericism and witchcraft from, especially contemporary forms, because I could see around me in academia that there were some studies on the witch trials and the Middle Ages. So there were some historical studies on witchcraft, but there was really nothing that was contemporary. There was Ernesto De Martino, who in the 20th century has studied a bit of magic in the South, for instance, but I couldn't see any of that going on in the Italian academia. So at first, I went more into Buddhist studies. So I studied Sanskrit and Tibetan, and I thought initially that I would become a Buddhist studies scholar. And even in that case, I was more interested in the magical side. So I was more interested in yoga and in Tantra and in all the subsections of Buddhism that have more to do with esotericism, pretty much. So even when I was when that was what I had in mind, my core interest has always been magic and esotericism. And then I came across a YouTube video from my now friend and colleague, Dr. Jenny Butler, who was giving a presentation about her PhD on Irish witchcraft and paganism. And I thought, wow, is that possible to study that like academically? I didn't even think that there was a possibility because, you have to think that for somebody who is Italian and has never been exposed to that kind of research before, I didn't even think that it was possible, to be fair. So that kind of was a turning point. And I thought, okay, maybe if it's not possible in Italy, I have to see whether there's a chance to do this elsewhere. And a series of, let's call them coincidences, led me to apply to do two universities in the UK. I applied to Chester and to Leeds, and I got into both. And I decided to go to Leeds because they also offered me a teaching contract while I was doing my PhD. So I started teaching alongside my PhD. So I've been teaching there for 9 years now. Because my PhD was in collaboration between the University of Leeds and Leeds Trinity University, which are two different universities. So, but the PhD was awarded by Leeds Uni, and I'm teaching at Leeds Trinity. So yeah, that's my origin story. And in the last year of my PhD, I asked my supervisors to have a sabbatical from teaching so that I could write up my thesis or dissertation, as you say in America. In the UK, is the opposite. They call thesis the PhD and dissertation the bachelor's and master's. So it's always a bit confusing. But yeah, I was given that I wanted to write up my PhD, I asked for a sabbatical from teaching, and they agreed to that. So and then I found myself having all this teaching energy that I couldn't go into class, and I thought, you know what, maybe I could start a YouTube channel. So I started a YouTube channel in the last year of my PhD, and at first I was just talking about things that I had researched for my PhD, but didn't end up in my PhD, because when you do a PhD, you have to study all sorts of things that don't end up
Yeah,
actually in your
yeah.
thesis. So I thought, okay, it's a bit of a waste to have all these research and not to do anything with it. So I thought I'm gonna make some YouTube videos, and so that's how it started. I started with material from my research and my PhD, and then as the project grew, I started to do dedicated research to just for my YouTube channel. So now I do dedicated research even on things that I don't research academically, but given that I do have the method to find the sources and collate them together and find the data and analyze the data, so I use all my academic skills to even do the dedicated research that I do for the topics that you see on my YouTube channel. But originally, it just started out as me covering the things that I was already researching for my doctorate.
Uh, well, something I had noticed that you did, I think it was Giordano Bruno you've covered, right? Or I could be
Giordano
wrong.
Bruno, yes.
Yeah, was that somebody that you learned through your studies, or was that somebody you knew from, I guess, past?
School, yeah. Giordano Bruno is somebody from school if you're Italian.
Okay, all right.
So it's really I think the first time that we study Giordano Bruno is in high school. But I did so in Italy there are different types of high schools, and what I did is called classical lyceum, liceo classico in Italian for the Italian speakers. You can go through classical studies or scientific studies, or there are more technical type of high schools. So I did the classical lyceum. So you study Latin, ancient Greek, philosophy, literature, history, and obviously there's also chemistry, mathematics, and so on. But those are a bit more marginal because it's more focused on the classics. So yeah, I studied Giordano Bruno in high school. That was the first time. Giordano Bruno, Marsilio Ficino, all the
Oh
the
wow.
philosophers, the philosophers, magicians from the Italian Renaissance. They are pretty famous, and there's plenty of research in Italian on Giordano Bruno that I could use for my research. And I know that my audience is not Italian speaking, so I tend to put the references in English. But yeah, I had the chance to also look at the sources in Italian because there are many
Oh
more
wow,
sources in
Nice,
Italian.
nice.
that is awesome. Yeah, I forgot he wrote a lot of stuff in Italian, right? That was like his choice
Yeah,
language.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in Vulgate and yeah, some Vulgate, some Italian.
Nice. That is awesome. No, I just happened to notice that, and I've covered them recently too, so I was like wondering if that was something you picked up through academic studies. I guess one question. Does anybody have a question before I go? Does anybody want to ask anything? Okay.
Yeah, I one real quick,
Go
if I
ahead.
may.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I find it extremely intriguing, like you said, that in Italy nowadays, at least, you have this kind of I don't know. It's hard to find people that openly will study these kind of things, or even know, like you said, like you only discovered some stuff like when you went out in the UK and so on, so on. And but then now that you studied it academically, even like from your point of view, do you see where this started to change like that much? Because, for example, I can give a comparison. I'm actually from Brazil, and in Brazil we also have a lot of Catholicism, Christianism, and so on. But what happened there was that it mixed with like the African religions as well, and the like native religions, and it kind of became like syncretic. So even though Catholicism is strong there, it's like the magical Catholicism, let's say that. So like people know, or they will know, aware about the other stuff, like let's say that Africans used to practice, or that the natives used to practice, and so on. So it's kind of more, even if people don't agree or use, they care about it. So you can even talk, and or you're gonna be in the street and you're gonna find like a poster saying like, get the love of your life back, call this number, and it's gonna be like some love magic, whatever. But this is something I never see, at least anything. Maybe I'm skewed, but what I do find here is like more like orders, like mystical orders. Maybe this is what you can find nowadays, but I don't know. Maybe from your academic point of view, if you found that when that started to change.
Do you speak Italian?
Would be interesting. Yes.
Do you speak Italian? Okay, that gives you an
Yes.
advantage because so how can I answer that? I think that on the surface, I think probably in Brazil it's a bit more open. You know, the syncretism between magic and Catholicism. In Italy, it's a bit more hidden. So the Italian folk magic definitely syncretizes Catholicism and you know, an Italian autochthonous or indigenous, as I call them, practices. So it is something that is present, but it's more underground. It's not obvious. It's not something that you would easily find unless you have the right connections or you're from the place, and so you know the woman in the town that removes the malocchio, and then she will give you another contact, and then the other one. So when you are part of the community, it's very easy to find that. So when I started doing my PhD and I was talking with the Italians, everybody, I mean, there wasn't a single Italian that I spoke to that didn't say, oh yeah, my aunt or my cousin or my whatever, they went to one of these people. So either they had direct experience or an indirect experience through, that somebody in their family had been to one of these healers or witches. So I haven't come across a single Italian that had never heard of it. So everybody had heard of it in one way or another. So it's a bit like there's an expression in Italian that I never know how to translate. It's a bit of a secret in plain sight, so it's not very obvious. It's a bit underground, but then when you ask the right question, everybody knows about it. So in Italian, for the Italian speaker, a good expression would be il segreto di Pulcinella, which is a typical expression also from Naples, which is a secret that, that everybody knows about, but everybody pretends that they don't know. So, so yeah, it is definitely something that's quite pervasive. But so there is that kind of syncretism, but it's not as overt and as obvious or in plain sight as it is in Brazil, perhaps.
Do you think part of that could be literally just because
that
of the
makes
Vatican?
A lot of sense.
Oh, sorry about that, man. Yeah, I was wondering, like, do you think that literally could just because of like the Vatican right there? It's like, oh, we gotta act like we can't be too open about it. They might burn us.
Behave better.
Yeah, we end up like Giordano Bruno. You think that's reasons why sometimes it's a little bit more occulted than, like you're saying, than opposed to Brazil?
Yeah, and also because I think there are two types of stigma on these practices. One is the Catholic stigma, and the other one is the superstition stigma. So either they may face the thing, oh, this is just silly superstition, or that it goes against the Catholic Church. Even though if you talk with these healers and witches, they actually believe that they are very devout Catholics, especially the old generation of segnatori and segnatrici. They believe they are very devout Catholics, so they don't see a clash. And also a lot of my informants have a very good relationship with the local church. So the official stance of the Catholic Church is against these kind of practices, but in reality, I have seen in my fieldwork many of these healers and witches that cooperate, very nicely with the, with the local parrocchia or the local priest. So as always, there's I actually have a video on my channel, an old video on institutionalized versus lived religions that covers a little bit of research on that. But there's always discrepancy between what's on paper, the institutionalized religion, and what actually happens, what people actually do. And even though this is the discrepancy is bigger for, well, obviously maybe the discrepancy is not even there for religions like paganism, where you don't have a central dogma. Maybe the discrepancy doesn't even have a reason to exist. But for the monotheistic religions, you definitely have that. That there is especially with Christianity, there's a massive discrepancy between what's the official theology and what people actually do in their lives.
Yeah, actually, that kind of leads me to a question I had. I was going to maybe bring it up later, but I feel like it's a good time now. Is, in your opinion, Angela, like, how does Italian witchcraft influence how Catholicism is practiced in the country? You know, because like you're saying, yes, there's the syncretism of both, but like how I'm sure Catholicism's influenced the witchcraft, but how does the witchcraft influence the Catholic practice, in your opinion?
So, in my research, I distinguish between. So, I systematize the vernacular healing tradition of Italy as the traditional segnature, and there are free papers that are accessible online that people can download if they're interested, and you find them in the info box of my video on Italian witchcraft. But so in my research, I distinguish between the old generation of segnatori and the new generation of segnatori, which is not necessarily linked to age, but it's more linked to where they live, if they live in secluded areas, and how willing they are to share their practices. Now, with the old tradition of segnatori, I would say that their practice, in a way, was reinforcing their Catholicism, because they believe they were. I mean, these segnature, these magical practices, very often involve the Trinity, the Madonna, the saints. There's an informant of mine from Sicily who's now passed away, unfortunately, but she said, "I'm always in contact with the spirit." And I said, "Who is the spirit?" And she said, "Oh, it's a saint." But it wasn't a specific saint. It's just that there was the vocabulary that she had. I mean, because especially for the old generation, they don't have the concept, and especially when they haven't been influenced by the New Age or paganism, they don't have a concept of talking with the spirit. So they would just call it a saint, even if it is just a generic saint. The new generation of segnatori are more open to talk about these practices, are more open to syncretism, and they syncretize less with Catholicism and more with paganism, and also with New Age practices, with other forms of spirituality. So for them, sometimes the segnature can be a way to depart or slightly depart from the official Catholicism. So it varies. I think that's why I created the typology of the two different generations, because I think their approach to the practice is very different, to the point where a typology needed to be there. Otherwise, it would be too confusing to explain. But I've definitely noticed that patterns of behavior are very different between these two people. So the old generation are people that live in secluded areas, in the towns, and they don't really communicate with other practitioners. They are just like the town healer, and that's it. They wouldn't call themselves witches either. They would just call themselves the person who repairs the bones, or the person who removes the Sententunis fire, which is the shingles, by the way. There are also specific names for different types of illnesses. So they wouldn't define themselves anything other than the person who does this or the person who does that. Whereas the new generation is a bit more connected. They started to talk about segnature trans-regionally, because originally the term segnature comes from the region Emilia-Romagna. And that's the only region that had an actual name to describe these practices. And that's why the name, when people started to talk about it on social media, the name started to spread, and people from other regions also started to use the term segnature. And it's become more widely known nationwide now, whereas originally the term comes from Emilia-Romagna. There's also an interesting PhD research which was done in a university in France, if I remember, the University of Toulouse, by De Bernardi, and the thesis is in Italian, and it focuses more on the segnature in Emilia-Romagna, and it's from a few years back, before my own research. But it was quite interesting because it focuses on the area specifically. But yeah, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. That's great.
One question I wanted to get into, because I know you do cover, like, shamanism. Before we even start getting into that stuff, and I hate to ask you to do it, it's just I think I saw you do it on Ivy's show and I thought it was amazing. could you maybe give a little bit of an idea of what shamanism means from the academic and where that even comes from? I found that very interesting.
Oh God, I could go on that for 2 hours. Okay.
Mm.
Focus and try and give a very succinct answer to that. Okay, so because this is a question that I get asked a lot, especially I've been asked that in at academic conferences by colleagues when I was trying to defend my own thesis, which has been now defended plenty and has been published by Brill.
Good for you.
So yeah, so there are people that would say, "Oh, why do you use the term shamanism? Isn't shamanism just in Siberia? Isn't shamanism just in South America? Isn't shamanism just that? Is it a misappropriation to use it somewhere else?" It's like, okay, a step back. Let's understand what the term shamanism actually is, what it means, and where it comes from. The term shamanism is a scholarly invention. Let's start with that.
Right,
So
right.
it's an invention by Russian ethnographers in the 19th century that went to Siberia, and they were studying different regions of Siberia. And there is one region only, one very small area, the Tungusic area, where they had as a term for their local shamans, shaman. And so, given that it was one of the first ones that they came across, they said, "Oh, okay." Then, when they came across neighboring regions that had their own local names for their local healers, they would just overlap the term shaman and the term shamanism. So, based on this one only case, they said, okay, given that we see that what they're doing is the same, we're going to use the same term. So, they created the label shamanism to describe practices that presented certain characteristics like the entering older state of consciousness and having a contact with the spirit world and helping the community, being able to heal or do other magical endeavors. So the term shamanism is not Siberian. Shamanism is a Western category. It's an ethnographic category that it was first applied to Siberia, but not exclusively to Siberia. And then it started to be applied to other regions like in South America and in Asia. And the reason why I argue, along with other colleagues of mine, other religious studies colleagues, that the term shamanism, when obviously it present, the traits are present, should also be used in Western countries, is because shamanism has become an exoticizing category, which is very problematic. You cannot because then you create this exotic magical other, which at the same time sort of creates this mystique around these people, but at the same time it makes them into characters and doesn't really see what is there. And it also creates a separation between us, the rationals, the Westerners, and then them, the mystical others, the mystically rational. It's very problematic. So the fact that the term itself has always worked by overlapping over local specific categories, because in every region of the world where shamanism was present, they would have their own local names to define their shamans. I'm also familiar with shamanism, the Mapuche shamanism, for instance, in Argentina and Chile, and they have their own terms as well. Machi, for instance, for the female shamans. But when I went there, they would say shaman because they know that it's understandable. But they had their own local terms. And the same in Italy, there were their own local terms to define practices, to define the people that practice them. But shamanism, in and of itself, is a scholarly category. Is a scholarly category that has been exoticized for too long, and now needs to be de-exoticized because it is very problematic to do otherwise. So, and then what is shamanism? The characteristics of shamanism, because in my PhD and in the book that I published with Brill now, because it's been published, I argue that the traditional segnature is the indigenous Italian shamanism. So I use the term indigenous and I use the term shamanism, which I know is complicated, but I had chapters to explain that. So the reason also, because the reason I use the term indigenous is because, first of all, there's a difference which is very well established in academic literature and perhaps not so established in the general public. But there is a difference between indigenous religion and indigenous people. Indigenous people is a political category and belongs to specific areas of the world where there's been mass colonization, and the minority still lives with people that were the original settlers. But an indigenous religion is something different than indigenous people. And indigenous people may have indigenous religions, but they may also not. I mean, if an indigenous person is a Catholic, does it make Catholicism an indigenous religion? Of course not. So indigenous religions and indigenous people are two different categories that need to be, first of all, distinguished. Indigenous people is a political category that is very important to preserve because it helps people to retain certain rights and to acknowledge the problems that certain minorities have. Indigenous religion are religions that present certain characteristics, which are characteristics related to the land, to the culture, to the bloodline, to and they are very different from religions that are not indigenous. For instance, Christianity is not an indigenous religion because Christianity is now a religion that's transcultural, regardless of whether you practice it in Italy or in the US or in the UK. You're supposed to do the same thing, the same ritual, the same results. Whereas an indigenous religion is based on kinship, it's based on the contact with the land, it's based on the culture, it's completely immersed with the place where it comes from, and it is not the same to do it in Italy or in the UK. It's gonna make a difference because it is completely entrenched in the land and in the culture. So that is why I argue that the tradition of Signature is an indigenous practice. And how do I use the term shamanism in my own research? So shamanism is, we have established, is a scholarly category. So it doesn't come from Siberia. It's a scholarly category that has always worked by overlapping over local specific terms. Now, there is no agreed upon definition of shamanism because it presents in slightly different ways in different places. A bit like paganism. There are certain religious practices and religious movements that just have by their nature a certain fluidity. So this presents a lot of challenges for us scholars to try and understand them. But the fact that these terms are difficult to understand doesn't mean that we should disregard them, because these are terms that exist in the world that people use, and perhaps they are useful. So it's important for us scholars to take up the challenge and say, okay, how do I understand what shamanism is? So my response to that is that I use a double methodology to define shamanism in the context of my specific research. The first is that I use shamanism as a deictic term. So deictic comes from Latin deixis, which refers to terms that only have a meaning in reference to something. So for instance, terms like here and there. Here and there are terms that have very specific meanings. But if I just say here or there, it doesn't mean anything. It's a term that only assumes meaning when I put it in context. And I think that shamanism is the same. It's a term that, and a category, a spiritual religious category that only assumes meaning in a specific context. The second part of my methodology for defining shamanism is using discourse analysis, which comes from Foucault, Michel Foucault, who has developed this methodology. And it means analyzing the patterns of meaning that emerge from the discourse created around a term in a specific area. So I use discourse analysis, analyzing a huge amount of data and the patterns of meaning that emerged in all the discourses that Italians created around shamanism. So this gave me a localized and culturally specific understanding of what shamanism was, and allowed me to apply to the Italian context. Does it make sense? I hope it wasn't too academic-y.
No, that was great. That was great. I do like how you did say, just from my ignorance, I guess, obviously, how it's been exotic, whenever somebody says something about shamanism, I automatically think of South America or Indian tribe,
Right.
Native American.
Yeah.
A white person does
Siberia,
not pop up
yeah.
in my head at all.
I didn't even know it's originating in Siberia. Like I was like, what? Like that's crazy.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
always related it to Siberia. So
I'll see. I'm just ignorant to that. It's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
That's why I'm here to learn.
Is there any other questions you guys want to ask before I start asking more?
well, I kind of want to get into some of the early mythology and like the rising scope of how the term came about, the practice came about, kind of going back to the Etruscan Tana, going into Diana, looking at the moon.
Oh my God. So if you're talking about Leland, I have bad news for you.
Yeah, it's what I was also going
Do
to
you want the
question
bad
you.
news?
Well, yeah,
Leland
I was
is not Italian witchcraft. It's made
okay.
up.
Yeah. I was going to say, how much
So
stock can we put into this gospel of the witches that he
no, that's
manufactured?
the Gospel of the Witches is a complete fabrication by Leland, and
All
it
right.
has nothing to do with what happens in Italy. There are
Okay.
some elements of Italian folklore that he has mixed
Incorporated.
into his work, but
Mhm.
the as a whole,
Yeah.
it's not something that happens in Italy. And I know that when I say this, it upsets a lot of people because a lot of people really find value in Leland and the Gospel of the Witches. But
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I actually got recently an email from somebody asking me to write the foreword to the new edition of the Gospel of the Witches, and I thought, okay, is it okay if in the word forward I say this is a work of fiction? If that
Mm.
is okay with you, then I'm okay writing the
Yeah.
foreword.
Yep.
But yeah, so Leland has been I mean, let's be clear. I'm not trying to diminish the importance that Leland has had, because Leland has had a massive impact on the birth of Wicca, of contemporary paganism, and
Mhm.
it's been very important for many practitioners. So I don't want to dismiss that in the slightest. And I realize it from a mythical point of view, from really for what it created and the impact that he had. It is very important. It's very important for us to study. However, it is also important to distinguish between what is important from a mythical point of view and what is
Right.
factual history. And Leland is not factual history.
Factual history. Right.
So there is no evidence of a cult of Diana and Lucifer at
Mhm.
all. I have a dedicated video on Aradia specifically, if people are interested, on my YouTube channel. But yeah, also if you read if you are an Italian speaker and you read the diaries of Maddalena, it's so clearly written by an English speaker. I mean, there are
Mhm.
grammatical mistakes that only an English speaker would do.
Would
Obviously,
make.
there are grammatical mistakes that an Italian would do.
Mhm.
We do lots of mistakes like the congiuntivo, which a lot of Italians don't use properly. But there are very specific grammatical mistakes that only an English speaker would do. Like,
Right.
for instance, because Italian is a gendered language and English is not gendered. So
True.
you would have things like you have the article in one gender and then the term, the noun in another gender, and that's something that an Italian would
Doesn't.
never do, because it's
Like
just
rookie mistake.
yeah. So it's
I
it's
even know
very
that.
obvious. And yeah, exactly. So I think that at the time that there weren't perhaps but even in his own time he was not very well regarded by
Right.
the ethnographical scholars of his own time. So even in his own time he was not particularly regarded by the scholarly crowd. It was more regarded by the practitioners who I mean they had good reasons, of course, because at the time there wasn't scholarship around, especially in English, to gather whether what he was saying was correct or not.
Right.
There were ethnographers writing in Italian, but those wouldn't really appear in English. There's a lot of ethnography on Italian folk magic from the same time of Leland, but it's
Mhm.
only in Italian, and English native speakers don't speak Italian,
Right.
so they would go to Leland. But no, it's definitely not. It doesn't reflect factual history, and the same goes for his works on the Etruscans.
Mhm.
I suppose there are some kernels of
Of
historical truth, and there are some elements in Aradia that come from the Italian folklore, like the spell with the lemon is a very common one that you find in Italian folklore. So there are some bits of folklore that then he mixed with a completely different thing. Like in my online course on Italian witchcraft, I also talk about how different Aradia is from the actual folk witches, because Aradia is this rebellious figure that wants to go against the Catholic Church and is really a rebel. And Italian witches are the exact opposite. They try to comply as much as possible and assimilate as much as possible with the Catholic Church. So it's the complete opposite of what was going on in Italy at the time. So it's it's just not. It's not.
So
it's not history.
Can you give us some of the origins of the practice and how it came about, as far as the mythology in the actual vein of culture?
So there isn't one clear mythology, and this is another element that's because we want things nice and neat. But in reality, especially when it comes to folk witchcraft, you don't have a one unified mythology. You don't have this grand thing of Aradia, Lucifer, and Diana. You don't have any of that. Italian folk magic is very messy. It's messy, is raw, and it's quotidian, and it doesn't have this grand narrative around it. It is really just about helping people around, and there are different types of syncretism in the practices. There are also elements there are pagan elements as well. There are even Phoenician entities that are summoned. There are some segnature that contain elements that are also present in the Greek magical papyri. For instance, there's a segnatura that I was able to gather in my fieldwork that had Coptic that is the same present in one of the Greek magical papyri. So it is fascinating, but doesn't have a neat mythology as people would like.
Further into the mists than we can. It's kind of just a natural practice that's subsided as part of culture.
So in terms of the history of the segnature, this is quite interesting because it's something that I've been working on. I've done historical research lately, and I was invited at the Witch Fest in London just this weekend, and I had the chance to talk with Professor Ronald Hutton, and I'm talking with other historians because I'm a religious studies scholar and I'm primarily an anthropologist, and now I've gone into doing some historical research into the segnature. And I wanted to make sure that my data was, that my methodology was all right, for me to claim certain things. So when I went I didn't do historical research for my PhD because my PhD was anthropological. In academia, you've got to stick into your field. You cannot, jump between fields. But given that now I'm writing a new book on Italian witchcraft that's more practical, I thought, I want to solve this puzzle of the historicity of the segnature, and because a lot of people ask me how old are the segnature, and I just didn't have an answer, so I just said it's not something that I have researched. So I thought, let's actually do that, and let's look at what's out there. And I was really surprised to find, because I thought, oh, this is gonna be another thing, because all practitioners want everything to be the oldest of the old, and then it's actually like a centuries old. So that's kind of what I was expecting, but then the evidence surprised me because I actually found evidence of the practice being quite old. So I found evidence stretching back to the 11th century. If there is anything before the 11th century, we need further research, because I personally couldn't find it, but I would need to do more archival research to assess that. But I can at least say that from the 11th century, we have evidence of practices that we still have today. The first occurrence of the term segnatura in relation to the practice, because we have to be very careful when we make historical claims of continuity, is not sufficient to just see the term randomly appear somewhere. The term needs to be in reference to the thing that you are trying to claim the continuity from. So the first time that the term segnatura occurs in relation to a practice that still is present today is in a 16th century court case, where a woman is accused to draw the signs and use a segnatura, and it's pretty much the same segnatura that I looked at that and I thought, oh, wow. I was really shocked because it's literally a practice that is still going on today. So that was a surprise, but a very nice surprise. So I'm collating all this material, and this will be part of my my upcoming book, which has a specific chapter dedicated to history. And
Nice.
yeah, and as I said, because I want to make sure that everything is correct, I'm also
Yeah.
in dialogue with historians that have studied either the history of folk magic practices, so that I can have a reference point in terms of the methodology that they use, or that they have actually studied Italian witchcraft in historical period, so that I can cross-reference my findings with their findings and see whether there's any blind spot, anything that I missed, anything that I can learn from them. So it's always important to not work in isolation. That's one of the things that I like about academia, is that, and that I wish the general public knew more about science and academia, because sometimes you see journal articles, magazine articles that say study finds, and there's this new discovery coming from one study only, but that's not how science works.
Right.
Science works via the body of knowledge, that by the consensus that is created by different studies, not just one study. One study alone doesn't mean much.
Yeah.
So you need to collate lots of studies together. So even though small scale studies are very important because they are all part of the puzzle, so they need to be done. But the problem is when general public misunderstands a small scale study as the response and the end all be all about that specific thing, which is something we have unfortunately seen a lot during 2020, 2021. But it's really important to understand how science works. It works via the whole body of knowledge. And then, when you have a lot of data, you can get a proper assessment of what's going on.
Right. Broader agreement. Yeah.
I find that really interesting, Angela, your answer about like the signature only being like sourced to the 11th century, you said, right?
That's where I could find the first evidence myself, but I don't exclude, but at the same time, I cannot prove
Yeah,
that it goes further.
I just found it interesting because I assumed that it might be more influenced by like the Greco-Roman pagan culture, but like maybe not, that's not the case.
I don't have any evidence at the moment to support that. As I said, I have informants who claimed that there's a Coptic in the Segnatura that's the same as the Greek magical papyri, and I've had informants saying that their Segnatura contain Phoenician elements, but it is not sufficient, to prove historical continuity is not sufficient to say that, because what if somebody 2 generations ago read the Greek magical papyri and came up with a segnatura, containing that? You have to account for all the variables. So for me to claim a continuity that stretches back to that, I would need to have solid data, documents that report the practice. I was able to find evidence of the practice starting from the 11th century and evidence of the term associated with the practice from the 16th century. If there is anything stretching back, it is possible. I don't know. I don't have the data to say that that there is evidence or not. Maybe in the future, either I will have the funding to do that kind of research, or somebody will take that up as a PhD. I'd be very happy to help them with that. But at the moment, I don't have evidence to claim that it's older than that. But even then is but even then it's still like we are talking about a millennium. So I think that almost a millennium. So that was quite shocking, because most of the practices that we find today are really not that old. They claim to be that old, but they are not that old.
Yeah.
Is there any questions?
And when you prove that they are not that old, some people will be really mad.
Upset.
I had
I know,
one quick question. Yeah, I had one quick question to Angela. I don't know if you ever heard about the book called The Archaeometer from St. Ives. I'll try to hook you up with it if you never heard, because I if I remember correctly, like the book had a bunch of other things. Like the guy was French, but he didn't actually finish the book. Like supposedly his students finished it for him after he died. And I remember there was a section where they claimed a bunch of this historical, like the Phoenicians, like you mentioned, the Phoenicians and Ionians came and did some stuff in Italy and Greece, and then it kind of started changing some of the codes there and so on. So I don't know, maybe it could be an interesting read, as well as this kind of historical, because he claims a lot of stuff. So if that can be proven to be true, it would be very interesting how it shifts things. But if you never heard,
Yeah.
then I guess I'll try to email you afterwards.
Yeah, send me an email. By the way, for those of you who are Italian speakers who have the patience to read subtitles, I have an interview with a friend of mine who talks about the Roman the Roman religion in Italy. So, in case people are interested to know what actually was happening in the Roman times in Italy, but the interview is in Italian because he couldn't speak English. I was hoping that because I interviewed him because it was the time when YouTube started to implement the auto dubbing. And I thought that just as it does auto dubbing from English to other languages, that it would do the same with Italian to English. And it didn't. And I was very disappointed. So I just put subtitles. But
Very nice. If you don't mind, I do have a question from the chat. It says, do we have any ancient sources that document endemic magic to the Italian peninsula outside of the state religion imperial cult? And he says, Medea and other foreigners seem to have been viewed as witches by folks in the Greco-Roman world, for example. I don't know if you understand the
I'm
question.
not sure I understand the question. If it is about whether magic was present, of course, magic has always been present, will always be present. So it's not a matter of whether magic was present, it's more whether it's the same tradition, because there are so many different magical traditions and magical practices that you cannot say that there is a continuity just because one is magic and another is magic. It's a bit like saying, oh, Christianity is a religion and I don't know, another thing is a religion, so they are the same. They're not the same. So magic was definitely present, since I can't think of a time in history where magic was not there, or some form of asceticism. But it's a different matter than claiming that it was the same tradition of signature that it is practiced today.
And then we have this.
Well, I was going to say, I think when you're looking at magical traditions throughout the world, it all is dependent upon what works in the region and how those people participate with the land and bring forth these ideas. And it becomes ingrained and enculturated through the course of finding out what actually, works,
Carl, I think that Carl also follows my channel because I remember him. So was there ever an Italian Inquisition to seek out magic users like in Northern Europe and New England? So yes, of course there was. So yeah, Giordano Bruno is an example. So
yes, and if you
so
don't
there
know
was
who
definitely. But
stuff.
one thing that's interesting about the Inquisition is that so it was I think it was a very interesting time in history of magic, just because of all the mental gymnastics that people were making to make a magic acceptable, because people think, oh, all magic was unacceptable. That's not true. There's always been some form of magic that was acceptable. It was just a matter of what it was. So for instance, in the Renaissance and during the time of the witch trials, one thing that you find a lot in Italy is the distinction between natural magic and demonic magic. So natural magic was accepted, and the Vatican was okay with it. For instance, we have Giovan Battista della Porta, who I did my master's degree thesis on. He wrote De Magia Naturalis, Sive de Miraculum Rerum Naturalum. That's the title in Latin. So I worked on the Latin text from Giovan Battista della Porta, and yeah, basically he wasn't really persecuted at all because he was working on natural magic. So they made a distinction between using the magic of nature and communing with spirits. So if you were communing with spirits, then it was a no, burned, done. you're gone. Whereas if it was working with nature, then they said, oh, because you're just using what God gave you, and they were reframing it as actually just dwelling into the creation of God. So it really depended on how you framed it. So if it was framed as natural magic, then it was fine. And if it involved some communing with spirits, then it was a no-no. So you always have forms of magic that have been acceptable and unacceptable. I got a bunch of Christians doing video reactions to a video that I made a while ago, and they just flooded my comment section insulting me because I made a video called "Is Witchcraft Forbidden in the Bible?" And the answer is no, because at the time you didn't even have a term for witchcraft. But a lot of Christians really got angry with me about that.
Yeah, even the Psalms, right? Like all the Kabbalistic angel stuff, it's based on the Psalms, on everything they are calling the God to do and whatever. Or even a lot of grimoires were written by people there inside the church. So it's like, how can you claim, like exactly like you mentioned, how can you claim they don't use it? It's just
the question in my case was more about what is actually written in the Bible, and in the Bible, and at the time when the Hebrew Bible was written, you didn't have a term like witchcraft, which is like an overarching term that encompasses divination and healing and this and that. Now we have one term, or more than one. We have witchcraft, we have magic. These are terms that are overarching and encompass a lot of practices, whereas at the time they didn't have that. They just had specific names, like they had soothsayer, they had the divination, the necromancy. So all these things were completely different. And so what is really forbidden in the Hebrew Bible is the practice of the others, pretty much. So they had some practice that we would now, with the categories of today that they didn't have at the time, that we would now define as magic, and they were acceptable, like the divination with the umim and tumim. But there were other practices, which generally were the practices of the others, which were not acceptable. Fundamentally, the Hebrew Bible is really a testament to the Israelites trying to solidify their identities in their difficult situation. So everything that belonged to the others, like the gods of the others were demons, the practices of the others were evil practices or witchcraft, as we would say today. So it was really about forbidding the practices of the other and establishing their own identity culturally and religiously. So witchcraft, the way that we understand it today, is not forbidden, but the Christians didn't like that and said, this woman is wrong because the Bible says this.
Well, the Old Testament is full of it. This is Jewish mystical tradition, the whole thing.
The Mandrake group bringing forth the 12 tribes. How much do you think Sabianism and the worship of the stars interrelates with witchcraft in the Stragora?
I'm not sure. I haven't come across that at all in my research on Italian witchcraft, so I'm guessing not much.
That kind of leads me to a question I did want to ask you. When it comes to this stuff, have you ever noticed? Well, I'm assuming it also. I mean, things probably change depending on where you even are in Italy. I'm assuming. But have you ever seen like maybe them pull from like this seems like that might be influenced by the Kabbalah, or this might be influenced like all of a sudden you start getting magic squares or sigils being made, and this you don't see any. It's all
no, not in Italian folk magic. No, it's something that you find more in ceremonial practices, in ceremonial magic practices, in orders, but not in Italian folk magic. No, Italian folk magic is very raw and quotidian. It doesn't have these these overstructures.
Gotcha. Something I was just wondering about. Was there anything anybody else wanted to ask? No. All right. There was another question by that same guy, and I didn't save it. So sorry if I get back to it. I'll ask again. One thing when it comes to when you came to study, I guess like witchcraft and shamanism and stuff, was there common misconceptions that you think like the public has? And was there even times when you got into it, you were even like, wow, this isn't what I thought it was? Did that ever happen for you?
So the typical misconception, but this comes more from Americans, is that Italian witchcraft is a stregheria or it's Leland. That's like the most common misconception that I come across. So associating it with Grimassi or with Grimassi, stregheria, or Leland, that's the most typical misconceptions from Americans. And did you ask about my own misconceptions coming?
Oh yeah,
from
like
the-
not meaning even in a negative sense. It might even be like, oh, this even makes it more interesting. But was there even things where you're like, oh, I had no idea, like I'd find myself looking at this, or it was this case?
Yeah, I think it was really encounter with Italian shamanism that was really in a way surprising to me, because it's not how my research started. I didn't even think that that's what I would be. So the way that my research started, it wasn't to look at Italian shamanism, the indigenous shamanism. It was to look at the transcultural forms of shamanism. So originally my research started that I wanted to look at all the imported forms of shamanism, which I define as transcultural shamanism, because they are imported and reinterpreted in the cultural fabric of the place. Or they are practices that are just based on techniques and technologies, and like core shamanism, for instance, that can be applicable everywhere by everybody, regardless of the culture. So my research started looking at core shamanism in Italy, Andean shamanism in Italy, all these all these imported forms of shamanism, and how they were interpreted and practiced in the Italian context. And then I came across a woman who claimed to be the last Italian shaman of a hereditary tradition. And that's where it was the turning point of my research, because I thought, okay, Italian shaman, I never thought of that. So I asked you to meet up, and I spent a few days at hers and did rituals with her, collected tens of hours of interviews and so on, so that I could understand her tradition of Italian shamanism. And then the more she was talking about her tradition, the more it sounded very familiar for me as somebody who grew up in Italy. And I thought, what is the difference between your tradition that you call Italian shamanism and Italian folk magic then? And she said, oh, and she thought about it, and she said the her tradition had not been syncretized with Catholicism, whereas Italian folk magic had been syncretized. And so she thought that hers was more pure because of that. Uh, but that kind of opened, my research, the area. That was the first time that I thought, can there actually be Italian shamanism? Then I found other people that who there's another woman from Sardinia, and then ever since then there have been more who also claimed to be part of Sardinian shamanism. And then I found others who claimed to be Italian shamans as well. And so I interviewed all of them, and I tried to understand why they were using the term. And that just opened up my research. And I said, okay, my research cannot just be about transcultural shamanism. It needs to include Italian shamanism, and even in a way check whether this is a thing. But yeah, that is something that surprised me, because my starting misconception was that there wasn't Italian shamanism, because I was operating by the same bias that everybody does.
That's
That's
awesome.
one of the things that I like about academic research, is that I find not all practitioners are like that, of course, but I find that very often practitioners are very defensive about what they believe. And, when they are convinced of something, even faced with evidence, they just are too attached to their beliefs, and they still claim them to be, the truth or facts. Whereas for me, as a scholar, I feel that I have the freedom to always change my mind based on the evidence that I'm presented with. And I think this is a beautiful freedom that I would encourage everybody to entertain, because I think that we all should. I think that a healthy way to approach even your beliefs is to always have a little part of you that says, I might be wrong, and always be willing to challenge yourself and look at the evidence. So I think that's what happened to me, because I started thinking that there was an Italian shamanism, that the only shamanism that I could find in Italy was imported and transformed in the Italian context. And then I found that it was actually different. There was a form of Italian shamanism under my eyes, as I was growing up. It's just that I didn't use that term, and At the time, the term was not even known in Italy, whereas now, another reason why a lot of my informants prefer the term shaman, which is something that I did, I wrote a dedicated paper to. There are Italians who prefer the term shaman as opposed to the term strega, which is witch in Italian, is that strega has a history of antagonism with the Catholic Church, and people feel uncomfortable using it because given that people are very different, practitioners are very different from Aradia, they don't want to be the rebellious opposer to the church. They want to, not be ostracized by their communities. So they are not willing to use the term witch, but they are more willing to use the term shaman because shaman doesn't have a history of antagonism with the Catholic Church and has a more positive connotation for Italians. And also the previous pope, he also had during the pan synodic event in the Vatican, he also welcomed the statuettes of the Pachamama and invited people from from shamanic backgrounds, and that kind of solidified for Italians the fact that shamanism was okay. Witchcraft is bad, but shamanism is okay because shamanism is good, and shamanism is something that can, even the Pope thinks that can be can have a link with Catholicism. So that's another reason why and that's why it's so important to understand shamanism in context, when I was talking about the ictic terms, because the way that what shamanism means to Italians is different from what it can mean to somebody else who doesn't have the same history of antagonism with the Catholic Church when it comes to magical practices. So shamanism becomes, in a way, a term that allows these people to have a voice back. Because if you call it witchcraft, then it becomes problematic. If you call it shamanism, then it becomes more acceptable. And I have such an admiration for these local healers who literally help their community for free. They don't take money, they don't take anything. They just literally are there to help their town and their community. And they are continuously either disregarded as backwardly superstitious people or as evil witches that oppose the Catholic Church. So I think that it's also extending them a little bit of grace to allow them to use a term that doesn't have either of those connotations and allow them to have their voice back.
Yeah, and it's funny that they'll be considered like even charlatans or whatever up until the point that people need them. Like in Brazil, this happens so often that they'll have like a evangelical, as I think it would be Protestant in English, and they like Catholics and whatever, and they have a problem in their church, and they'll ask for the like Umbanda or Candomblé people to come and do some stuff. It's like because they cannot do it or won't know how to do it.
Yeah, I wonder too. That was interesting. What you said, Angela. If like shamanism is more acceptable to the Catholic Church at large, almost because it made me think of like Our Lady of Guadalupe when she like appeared in Mexico, right? And it's almost like she was incorporating that indigenous culture and trying to bring that indigenous culture into Catholicism, like underneath that, like sort of like merging the two cultures. So I wonder if that's where like the comfortability even sort of comes from with like these apparitions of like the Virgin Mary in these cultures, as opposed to like witchcraft specifically, I guess. And also I know just from studying some of the Marian apparitions that often the message is related to herbs or like using certain plants for healing. I know that was happening like during COVID specifically, like supposedly some seers and mystics who claim to like have messages from the Virgin Mary. She was giving advice apparently on, using wormwood to combat like the virus or heal yourself. So I don't know if that's maybe where the merging kind of comes from, a more like comfort level that the Vatican would have.
Yeah, sometimes it can happen. Yeah. And then it makes you wonder, like, what makes an apparition non-magical, for instance?
I ask myself that all the time. Like, what defines the difference between, say, someone who is a medium, for example, or a witch or whatever, and then that's not okay, but then it's okay to claim to have messages from like an angel or Saint Michael, the Blessed Mother. Like, why is one bad and then one is good? Like, why is one not acceptable and then one is acceptable? I always found
That-
that very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I find religious studies so fascinating, because
Mm.
you look at all the mental belief gymnastics that people have, but it's
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually really important because I mean, I'm fascinated by religion and spirituality because that's how people make sense of the world, and it is a way of making meaning. It is a form of meaning making, and belief making. So it's very fascinating to see how people see, create these kind of differences and the discourse that they create around them.
Hmm. I just wanted to also ask real quick, if you can give us sort of like just a general opinion. I know, like myself being of Italian heritage, like my family's half Sicilian, half Abruzzese. So like I know there's differences between like North, Central, and Southern Italians culturally in general. Like it's not all one blanket like culture by any
No,
means.
it's not.
No. So is there a difference in generality of the practice of signature from North to South?
Um, yeah, so there used to be more of a difference in the past, and now it's a bit more homologated. So between the different regions. So in the past, I could say that um, evil eye and evil eye removal was more prevalent in the south, and in the
Yeah.
south there was more of a prevalence of women. In the north you'd have more, well, I think that probably the majority would still be women, but you would have more men practicing the segnature, and you would have more rituals like to fix bones, for instance, fix bones, and they would use more specific oils for the segnature on the affected areas. But yeah, it depends. I would say a general distinction, at least in the past, is not so prevalent now. Was that the South was more, there was more evil eye stuff going on, and in the North there were more men and more healing practices that had to do with fixing bones and things that you
Physical.
wouldn't find so
Yeah.
physical. But yeah, you also have physical rituals in the south as well. It's not like you don't have them at all. There were some specific ones that seem to be more prevalent in the north, but yeah, there are also some rituals that are very similar to the shamanic rituals of soul retrieval, which is the rituals for the fright. But yeah, I suppose that now you find really these kind of rituals throughout Italy. So it's not, I wouldn't say that there is much of a north-south divide
Okay.
anymore. But yeah, you have all sorts of rituals. Also, the one for the fright is a bit like a soul retrieval because it's based on the idea that if you have a traumatic event, so if you experience a strong fright, then part of you, is missing from that point, and that will lead to illnesses and ailments. So you need to sort of recuperate that part of you. So yeah, I've had informants from Firenze, but also from other regions, from Tuscany. Tuscany is the region where Firenze is, or Florence, as you'd say in English.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
Interesting.
I had a question. I don't know, like I remember seeing on, I think it was Instagram or something. And if I'm not mistaken, it was in Sardinia. There was like now I don't remember if it was like a specific. I think it's like a carnival they call it. The guys with like some masks. It reminds me a lot of, in Germany they had the Krampus or whatever. It's the very similar, like a kind of monster like thing. And so there's this ritual, and I remember seeing very quickly on Instagram. I'm not sure though how much of that is an actual, like, let's say, thing they used to do before and just got continued, or if it's just like a
no,
new.
it is still going on. Yeah,
Okay.
it is still a practice that they do in Sardinia. Yes,
Is
it's
there a
very
name for
interesting.
it? Like
I can't
you know?
remember the exact name now off the top of my head because
Okay.
it is in Sardinian, but I
Okay,
can
but
I can let you know.
I can also search it up. Okay, but that it's an actual thing. It's not like a.
Yeah, no, it
Got
is
it.
an actual thing.
Okay, cool.
Nobody else has any questions. I was going to ask something. Anybody else? Now this also, this question may be due to, unfortunately, my understanding of shamanism. Again, I always think of Native Americans or, South Americans. And from experiences that I've had, when it comes to like shamanism or hearing that, it seems for me to be synonymous with somebody undergoing some sort of like almost pushing themselves to an NDE. Sometimes even with like ingesting certain things to either like be more of a hallucinogenic or an actual poison that may not totally take you out, but bring you pretty close. And then how I see that kind of redone in, I'll use one example, Skull and Crossbones. They put you in a coffin and make you seem like you're getting buried or whatever, nailed shut. I've experienced that myself in the OTO and initiations, getting in something like that. So I do even see like even the white people maybe referencing to that same idea. Now, long story short, unless I'm completely wrong, again, because of my misconception of shamanism, is there any practices like that you have seen in Italy or in Italian where they may be kind of like putting themselves under certain stress to have certain experiences?
You mean in terms of some ecstatic dances and things like that?
Yeah, or like
You have the Taranta. The Taranta would be probably an example of that. I have a chapter on that as well in my upcoming book. So yeah, the Taranta would be an example of an ecstatic dance that you would have where there was the belief that the person was somewhat bitten by a spider, and they went into this dance, but it was a whole community ritual of an ecstatic experience that would also promote ritual. Yeah, the tarantella. The tarantella
is
the one that
dance
you
comes
find.
from. That's the origin of the dance.
Yeah,
I
the
did not know
tarantella.
that.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
the Taranta is the one from Salento. There's actually a new book from a colleague of mine who teaches at University of Harvard. It's called The Spider Dance by Giovanna Parmigiani. She's also Italian, and she focuses also on the contemporary practices of the Taranta in the Salento region. So that's for those who are interested in that specific type of practice, that would be a good read. And I also reference her in my chapter where I talk about the Taranta and the Tarantella. So that would be the closest to what you described as an ecstatic dance.
Or maybe wording it this way, almost like, is there like a hero's journey that these people go through on their own? You know what I'm saying? Like something along that lines. Is there anything like that kind of comes about within what you've looked at?
What do you mean?
Like I would even say like kind of going off on your own and like, ingesting certain things or putting yourself through again. Like
You mean like going to this kind of initiatory?
yeah, but doing it like
state.
yourself, like self-initiatory to have an experience.
So there's the informant that I was talking about before, the one who defines herself as the last Italian shaman of a hereditary tradition. She told me that she went through this very tough initiation with her grandmother, where she was tied to a tree and had to stay in the woods for weeks, and had to menstruate on herself and defecate on herself, and had to face the wildlife, and it was part of a dehumanizing experience that she thought was important for her to be, reborn as a shaman. And she felt very strongly against core shamanism, and where you visualize to go into a cave, because she says you have to be in a cave physically to understand that. I think that both practices have value personally, but that was the experience that she told me. And another Sardinian shaman, these case studies are actually present in my book, and I wrote about them in my Brill book, which is pretty much the book version of my PhD. And there's also the Sardinian shaman, the one that I did the second case study on. And she also talked about having to go through an illness that nobody would understand what it was about, and she had to be able to heal herself. So you do have cases like that, but you also have cases where the initiation just happens on Christmas Eve, and your grandmother or grandfather initiates you and gives you the signature and the words of power, and that's it. So you find both examples, examples of people that go through this very difficult initiatory journey, and those who don't.
That's awesome. That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you. Totally answered my question. Awesome stuff.
Thank you.
In that same line, do you find any cases of ecstatic states for divinatory or revelatory kind of understanding within?
So you mean in the sense where they enter an altered state of consciousness?
Right.
Yeah, I think so. It's not always that obvious. So there are some of the practices in folk magic that um, where people just really practice these things as part of their daily life, and there are other practices where there is a more obvious state of trance or altered state of consciousness. But yeah, even the ones that they incorporate them in their daily life seem to
Right.
sort of move between the ordinary and non-ordinary world quite quite smoothly in a way.
Just natural function per se.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, maybe also, and then maybe we'll start to wrap it up soon. When you had stayed with that lady, and I guess watched her and studied her, I guess what I'm looking for is just like maybe a little bit of an example of like what would be like a practice. I'm just keeping it real because I guess my idea of what practice is, and I'm like more of a ceremonial person. I automatically think of like sigils or tulpas or talismans and stuff like that. Like, do they have like certain things where they might actually make like a satchel? Like, if somebody was to practice, can you give us like a picture of what they would be doing, or what it incorporates, or what it entails? Is it just prayers?
Is it the experience with this particular woman, or in general in terms of
whichever's easier for you to actually explain. You know what I'm saying? If it's easier for you to just give us a lowdown of what that lady's experience was like, that's fine too. If you want to give us a different answer.
So generally speaking, the signatura is a mix of gestures and words of power that are passed down to you through initiation and are generally secret. And the way that people pronounce them is very often inward. So that's one of the things that woman, that shaman taught me, how to pronounce things inward as opposed to outward. There are practices with the thread. There are rituals with using certain threads in a specific way. There are rituals that use hair. One ritual actually we did in person, and it was for a specific purpose because at the time I was particularly stressed by a situation that it's better that I don't talk about publicly, but it was work related. But yeah, it was a specific difficult situation that I was dealing with, and she taught me a ritual using my hair and my tongue on the hair to pronounce things inwardly, um, what I wanted to achieve, and it did happen. My problem was solved. Let's put it that way, without giving too much details.
Nice.
So, these are examples of practices, but there are many really. There are some that would use herbs. There are some that would use salt. So there are really numerous rituals. Even the pins in the lemon, which is probably one that even
Right.
Americans know. So yeah, there are really lots of rituals. That's why I decided to collect them in my upcoming book, because I just created like this large collection of all the rituals that I could find.
Yeah, that was something I was actually going to ask and totally forgot. Like, would they be incorporating herbs or candle burning and, like maybe, crystals and stuff? So I guess like you kind of answered that. It was something I was going to ask. Yeah, I was just wondering like, what that would incorporate. Yeah.
Maybe even more recently, I don't know how much of it is it's like actually, I mean, obviously it's gonna be more recent, but like the cards, I think it's like Sibylla, the Sibylla cards, I think also are like
Sibylla, yes.
in today's date. Do people also use it like together with these practices, or not necessarily? Like depends on the.
I think the cards of the Sibylla are more used also by people that are generally interested in witchcraft and paganism.
Mhm.
I haven't seen many of the segnatori segnatrici using them, but I wouldn't exclude them. I think that the play cards are used more, especially like the Napolitan cards, le
Oh,
carte
right.
napoletane. Le carte napoletane are the ones that are very used.
Oh, well, I have those.
Yeah, those are the most common ones here in North America.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, when we were over to Italy, I saw a pack of those. And I was like, I gotta buy them here.
I have like 5 packs in my house.
Yeah, another reason why I wanted to even ask about, I guess, you know, the herbs and stuff specifically, believe it or not, is, you know, going back to, I think, kind of practicing like what's local in your area. I would assume then, like Italian. I mean, listen, this is probably a bad way to get my point across, but like I'm sure eggplants and tomatoes are more abundant naturally in Italy than in North Carolina. You know what I'm saying? So like maybe there's just certain things that would be more natural for you to be working with because of the energetic stuff in your area.
Like
So I
extra
would think
virgin
that,
olive oil, which is very used.
yeah, let me just, yeah, exactly. Like, so I'm wondering, you know, I'm assuming then like there's probably things very specific to that just because of what was abundant in the area and what works for them.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think extra virgin olive oil is one of those for sure.
Yeah. Was there anything else anybody wanted to ask before we start to wrap it up? I know we did tell her about an hour and a half, so I won't keep it here too long. I thought that was really great, Dr. Angela. Again, like, you know, I'm really excited I got you to come on to talk about this topic because it's something that I have thought about and heard about for a long time. And you always hear, like, kind of like what he even said, it's a lot of it's word of mouth, but there's a lot of things I've even been told or came across when I was, you know, just starting to practice that I realized kind of like wasn't correct. And then it came across your stuff and you seem to validate it. So I appreciate that. Was there
Thank you for
anything that,
inviting.
oh, of course, of course. Is there anything you would like to leave us with or anything you want to say that you feel like maybe you just want to even promote or just that you didn't get out while you were on the show? Is there anything that you'd like to say right now?
Yeah, I'll just remind people to check out my website, drangelapuca.com, drangelapuca.com, so that you can check out my courses and my services. If you're interested in Italian witchcraft, there's a dedicated course on that. And also to follow me on my social media as Angela Symposium or Dr. Angela Puca, and consider to supporting my work with Patreon or any other of the forms of support that you will find on my channel in the bio section, in the comments, and everywhere.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much. And like I really mean it. I think people who listen to this show, or especially the YouTube people in the chat, if you're really into this channel, I really think you will find her channel totally amazing and very interesting. So go check it out for real. Thank you again so much for coming on. Again, it was amazing and it was an honor to have you on. And before we wrap it up, I'll let the other people remind everybody where you can find their stuff. Real quick, Teresa, if you want to plug the Spiritual Gangsters, which has been dead for like a year, you can.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me
I've
back
just
for
been
this.
listening.
Yeah, no, you know, I still have my content up there if anyone's interested. You know, there's some really good interviews, and we did a whole series on like Marian apparitions, Eucharistic miracles. That was really cool stuff. So there's that on the Spiritual Gangsters YouTube. But yeah, otherwise, Occult Research Institute, you know, don't forget it, don't sleep on it. Check it out. You always forget to plug it, so I'll plug it for you. But thank you for having me back, Dr. Angela. I learned so much, and I really appreciate, you know, shedding some light on my heritage. Is very interesting to learn about. So thank you.
Thank
And
you.
yeah,
Thank you,
Robbie and Matt.
Teresa. If I can call you the way that I would pronounce your name.
Yes, please, per favore. Thank you.
Yeah, we would say Teresa.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I have to say, honestly, she really hasn't podcasted in I don't know how long. Like you and then I had attempted with Robbie Marks, were able to pull her out of retirement. So
And I'm just meeting Matt. So nice to meet you, Matt, for the first time. I've seen you on. I just haven't been on with you. So yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Teresa. And Robbie Marks, real quick, let everybody know where they can find your stuff and all your art.
Yes, this was a great show. Thank you for everything, Dr. Puca. I really enjoyed your analysis and breaking down some of these things. As far as my stuff, if anybody wants to check out anything I do, you can just go to my Linktree, which is Linktree RMARX, and that'll pull up my art, my Patreon, my podcast, etc., etc. And thanks again, Nick. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. At last, Matt, sir.
Yes. Also, thank you very much, Dr. Puca. Really interesting, like made me see things that I couldn't see before in the Italian scene, let's say. I'll try to have the eyes for it now when I'm walking around here. And thanks a lot for that. Very, very cool stuff. And yeah, you can find me always as at Mattmora19. That's on X, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, maybe some other place I missed, but all those places. And there's also my website. That's Kabbalah.com, KAABALAH.com. And the Twitter Spaces, which will stop a little bit the end of the year. Just have some pauses here and there. But I mean, we have all the catalog at The True Grey Lodge with the V, so thetruegraylodge.com, and on YouTube as well. So yeah, thanks very much.
No, thank you, Matt. And I appreciate you making it on. And again, Dr. Angela Puca, we really, really appreciate you coming on. It was an amazing time. We got to hear a lot, and I'm really proud to be able to present this information to the people that listen to this show. And hopefully, maybe in the future, we'll get you on again for something else. Definitely go check out her podcast again, her show on YouTube. I cannot stress that enough. I really do think people who listen to this show will really dig that. You might even start listening to her more than me, unfortunately. But yeah, go check it out. And that's the end of the Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.